Every year, Sheringham and Cromer hold a Crab and Lobster Festival. One of the events this year was a talk by skipper Jim Lingwood. Jim's been fishing the seas off Sheringham for over 22 years. He was originally a draftsman, but he followed the call of the sea.
I am a commercial crab and lobster fisherman, and this is my slipway that I work from. My boat is Tradewinds 2, the yellow one down the slip. It's a 19-foot boat. I have a 40 horsepower engine and I go to sea quite a rapid rate of knots. The reason that I go to sea is because I am catching crabs and lobsters for a living. The way I catch crabs and lobsters is in a crab pot. This is the traditional style of pot that was used probably 150 years ago, but it's now used in metal frame. It's tied up with net rather than the handcrafted labour-intensive pot that was done when they were first out. So I use horse mackerel, scad, as bait, okay? So the bait bar, which is on each side of the pot, the button lifts up, the bait goes in, closed down, all right? So the bait is in the pot, the lid goes, it's closed. Once it's in the sea, it's fishing. On Monday, after only 24 hours, all the bait had actually gone. What we have to do in that occasion is use a slightly different bait. We use a harder bait, like salmon heads, if we can get it, cod, or even to the point of skate. If you can get ruga, it's fantastic hard bait. And the longer it can stay in the pot, the longer it's fishing, because once the bait is gone, there is no more crabs going to get in. I hauled a pot day before yesterday, and it had around about 30 large crabs in it. The normal is probably only 3 or 4 large crabs. The rest of the pot would be considerably full of diddly little crabs. We have a minimum landing size, all right? So crabs and lobsters are, under the legal terms, they have to be returned to sea if they're under a size. This is what I use to measure the crabs. It's called a met. And the measurement on this larger side is 115 millimetres or 4.5 inches in old money, and that has to be measured across the back of the crab. Anything underneath that has to be thrown back. The other side is for lobsters, and you measure it between the eye and the back of the hard shell on a lobster. Right. This is the female, and this is the male. Now, both edible. The difference between them is when you look at the underneath, the female crab has got the broad apron. She's nicknamed a broadster. In and around old times around here, somebody come, hey, got a broadster, mate? And I mean, they want a female crab. The apron is wide under there, but in the male, it's quite narrow. Can you all see the difference in that one? The other difference is the back of the crab on the female, it's quite domed, whereas the male is quite flat. So another difference. And the other one, not quite so obvious, is the claw size. On a female crab, Purat, I mean, they're both roughly the same size crab. The actual claw size on a female is slightly smaller than it is on the male. So if you like the white claw meat, the male is the one to go for. If you like the general body meat, the female is the one to go for. This time of year, the female crab is absolutely beautiful and sweet. All right, when I am at sea, I've already got pots that are fishing. They've been at sea, I shoot my pots away. And I know my gear because they work underneath this flag. Now, I just got a feeling I like this colour for some reason. It just sort of worked well. Bit of promotion to the top flight. However, I'm not a football fan. I just have yellow and green flags. Now, the buoy is attached by 60 yards of rope. All right, there's 30 yards of thinner rope onto 30 yards of thicker rope. And that in turn is connected to an anchor, the pin. The anchor itself, I mean, it's not overly heavy. Some use bigger anchors than this. This works, this holds the seabed, and it's all joined together. So the rope, generally speaking, is known in strange names. It's 15 fathoms or 30 yards, or the kids at school now call it 27 metres. It's the same length. And they're all joined together, and the anchor is then bent on. It's the phrase we use to tie the knot. So it's pulled through the loop and spun round twice, and that is That's the anchor all joined up. So, buoy flag, 60 yards of rope, anchor, 30 yards of rope, pot, another 30 yards of rope, another pot, another 30 yards of rope, another pot. I work 12 pots in a shank, which is between flags and between anchors. So there's a quarter of a mile of rope between flags. I mean, that's a lot of gear. I work 10 shanks of 12. I work 120 pots on a day. It takes me about half an hour, 25 minutes to half an hour to haul a shank of pots. So I'm out at sea 5.5 hours in a normal day. And when I come home, because of how I'm set up, I don't process because I can catch enough crabs and lobsters to do a reasonable income by selling all my product live. A lot of other fishermen will have their own process facility, so they cook their own crabs in-house, dress them, and have either a market through shops, hotels, pubs, or to the general public. There is a sort of an interesting price structure. A crab live, I'm not going to tell you all these secrets because if I do I'll have to kill you, and there's a lot of you to go through. So a crab generally is worth about 50-60 pence live. If you cook it and you dress it and you sell it to the public, it's worth £4-5. So there's a considerable markup in the processing side. I have done it. I don't like it. I like to go to sea, do my bit, come home, job done. It works really well for me. All right, has anyone got any questions about anything that I've said that you may not understand or you might like me to expand
Just
on?
that, so if you get 60p per crab, you're going to get quite a few crabs in a day.
Today I landed about 500 crabs.
And you're just one of...
I'm just one of several. In May 2017 season, in 20 days at sea, I landed 3¼ tons of crabs. That's 10,000 crabs in 20 days in one small boat. So they must be out there on top of each other knee deep, the amount of crabs. People might say, well, how can you possibly keep catching crabs to that degree? Because they're going to run out, there's going to be no crabs. The reason that there is crabs there is because everything under 4.5 inches, anything under that width, goes back alive and it will grow. And because that exoskeleton, the only way that they grow is to discard the old shell, the hard shell, and the soft body. And that's a really interesting procedure. On the back of the crab, where this is where the apron joins the shell, is a split. When you dress a crab, that's the point of where you open it, where you break it. Now that's also the point of where the jelly crab slides out the back. He splits the shell and he will walk out of the back of the old hard shell, discard that, and he leaves the gills in place as well. They grow new gills. But everything else is exactly the same as the crab that he came out from. But because it's jelly, it's watery jelly, it actually then firms up, but it's grown bigger. And it can grow, a crab that size on one molt will probably grow 1 inch in width. So the difference in size between the stuff I've thrown back this year, one molt, and it's up to there. It's up to size again. And like I said, the amount of crab that I actually catch in a pot, probably only 4-5% of what I actually keep from what's actually in the pots. So there's a huge proportion of small, undersized, unfit crabs in the pot, in and around the ground. But the actual ecosystem that is the crabs and lobsters are sustainable because every year I go to sea and I can always know that I can come home with a large volume of crabs and lobsters to make my income sufficiently so I don't have to process, so I can make a living at selling my crabs live.
Do you know which bit is your area?
Right, there is no specific area where we go other than out there in the wet stuff. The only restriction is if somebody else has already got a gear in the sea, and you'll know that there because their flags will show, you see. So what we do is we go out there and we shoot parallel to the seafront, so we're in the tide line. All right, so when you see a flag pretty much a quarter mile away, it's opposing flag at the other end. Well, I could shoot inside it, outside it, or below it, or above it, depending on if I want to get in a specific area. This area, it's been designated a marine conservation zone. It's called the Cromer Chalk Reef or Chalk Bed. And because it's been designated a marine conservation zone, they do look at people who work in it, people who are involved with it, and there's the organisation that are looking at protecting the zone from whatever. I mean, pollution is a major one, especially plastics these days. Everyone's aware of that. We've fished for 200 odd years and it's still there. So, you know, we are like the custodians of it, if you like, the farmers.
Do you catch lobsters in
Yes, you can. I mean, the thing that determines what actually I catch in there, more than anything, is the bait. Horse mackerel scad is a universal bait. It will draw lobsters equally as crabs. If I just fish with cod, there's less inclination for a lobster to want to go in after it. They like this stuff. They like horse mackerel. But there is a time of year when lobsters are more predominant than crab. This time is now moving into the crab season because of the numbers. And crabs and lobsters, although they live on the ground, they don't really like each other. A lobster will eat a crab, especially in its soft shell state. They predate on it. And due to the fact that everything crabs and lobsters do is temperature orientated, all right? It's all governed by temperature. In the middle of winter, the temperatures in the sea drops below 4 degrees. Crabs don't move. They go to ground, they hibernate, or they move right off. And until the water warms up in, say, March time, and then they'll start to move, and then they'll obviously start to feed. And when they start to feed, they really are putting it on. And then they get to a point, probably around early June, when they've had enough food, they need to shoot the shell, there's this need to grow, and that's when they do it en masse. And there's a whole load of vulnerable soft-shelled crabs out there, and that's when the lobsters come out on the ground. The lobsters are looking for a quick, easy meal. So there is this interaction between when crabs are predominant and when lobsters are predominant, and it works through the season. And then at the other end of the year, you get November, the temperature of the sea drops. Again, the crabs and lobsters will go to ground or move off.
I've got a question. Does the wind farm out there affect you at all?
Absolutely. From the perspective of a fisherman, it's another 17.5 square miles of ecosystem. Only the reason I say that is because I've been involved with the wind farm, and I was doing survey work on board as a fisheries liaison representative, and I saw how the construction went on. And each of the wind turbines and the substations, there's 90 marine structures out there, and every one of them has been rock dumped. There's a whole load of this granite all the way around the bottom, and consequently each of them, because it was in predominantly a sandy, barren area, that's on a shoal, that's why they built the wind farm on the shallow ground. But now they've got the rocks out there, there's features for stuff to live on. So that starts at the very base, you've got weeds and stuff, but then you've got mussels, and then you'll have the predators will go in on top. So there will be 17.5 square miles of additional eco area for the crabs and lobsters to breed, and then when they spawn, that comes round in the tidal current and comes back round. Yeah, there's no restriction on fishing the wind farm other than you work away from the turbine itself. There is issues with marine structures such as oil rigs where you're not allowed within 500 metres, but that doesn't apply to wind turbines. I think that there's a 50 metre and you're not allowed to tie up on it, but you can work. They're 700 metres apart. You wouldn't know to look at it from here. There's 11 by 8, there's 88 turbines, and they're 700 metres apart, and it's like a diamond shape. And it's an interesting arrangement. But yeah, from my perspective, I mean, I see that as a plus, because it's added an area that is now workable and sustainable, and with stuff on it that the crabs are going to live on. It's all, you know, it's got to be good. You're welcome.
The next time you tuck into a crab sandwich, think of Jim Lingwood, who has to combat the weather, seas and the tides to bring you such a tasty meal.